Good morning, YouTube. Today we're going to talk about buying your first supercar.
So are you recording all of the nefarious activities?
If you're new to the channel, my name is Dan, and this is our dealership, NG Supercars. And I bought my first supercar about a decade ago, and since then my entire life has transformed, and now I went from working on software to working on cars and owning a dealership. And in that time, I've learned a lot of stuff about first-time buyers, because honestly, the vast majority of the people that buy cars from us are first-time buyers. So I wanted to talk about some of the things to think about and some of the considerations when you're buying your first supercar. So let's dive right into it. But first, do me a favor, like, share, and subscribe. We do appreciate your guys' support. And of course, check out normalguysupercar.com and ngsupercars.com, our websites. Okay, so the first thing that we need to talk about when we're talking about supercars is depreciation, because it's something that you need to understand, that the supercar world is totally different than most of the other cars. And also, I want to start off with saying we're talking about buying used supercars, not brand new, because the equation is completely different when it comes to buying new cars. Also, another quick disclaimer, this is general advice about supercars as a whole. Obviously, we're highly focused on Ferraris here at our shop and in our business, so we're going to talk about Ferraris, but you can kind of extrapolate that into other brands. There's just some differences to consider. But depreciation. So here's the big thing about supercars that I think is misunderstood when people first start looking into supercars as a purchase. These cars depreciate for a while, and then they actually appreciate. So typically what's happened, and who knows about the future, but historically, most of these supercars that were built in, I'm going to say, the 90s, early 2000s, and even 2010s and teens, they all depreciated to about half of their MSRP, kind of stopped, and then started going back up again. And now a lot of these cars are above their original MSRP, and it doesn't look like there's any sign of them slowing down. So the equation is a bit different than buying your normal vehicles or your normal sports cars. For example, if you go out and buy a Corvette, you're probably going to take a depreciation hit as you own that car. If you go out and buy a Ferrari F430, about the same price, the 430 is just going to keep going up. So from that perspective, it makes the equation a bit different. It also means the financing aspect of it can be quite different, which we'll talk about in a minute. Now, the only thing to consider is you got to think about the maintenance on these cars is not cheap. Let's be real, especially if there's deferred maintenance. So if you get a Ferrari F430 that's had nothing done to it, it's just been sitting around for the last decade, it's going to need tens of thousands of dollars in work, 100% chance of that. So yes, when you compare the Ferrari stuff or any of the supercars to a Corvette or something like that, there's a high probability the maintenance is going to be more expensive, so that should be factored in. But something I like to consider thinking about with these cars is, yes, the maintenance can be more expensive, but it's not your daily driver. This isn't the car you buy that you're taking to the grocery store, that you're taking the kids to school. It's the car that you take out on the weekends. It's the car that you go to special events. So in a worst case scenario, if something breaks or if it needs some maintenance and maybe you don't want to spend that money right now, or maybe you don't have that money right now, you can let the car sit and it should not affect your life, hopefully, if you've done things right. So that being said, people always ask, what is the amount of money I need to own one of these cars, or how much money should I make in order to buy one of these cars? And the answer is, I can't tell you that. I don't know, because your life could be completely different than my life, than the other person's life, and so on. You know, the person who's got 5 kids, a wife, a big mortgage, and all this other stuff obviously needs to earn a lot more money to be able to afford this than the guy who is single, has no kids, lives in a very reasonably affordable home, maybe not even in a home, maybe they just like all they have is cars. I don't know, maybe they live in a garage. But you could make your life pretty cheap and still afford one of these cars if you wanted to. So there's a huge variance on that. I don't know. There's an old saying that says that when you buy a Ferrari, you should have twice the amount of money as the car costs, and I think that's total crap. With a slight asterisk of, if you're buying one of the old Ferraris, we're talking 90s and earlier, that can be true. Maybe not twice as much as the car costs, but you need to set aside a good chunk of money. So yes, the initial expense of the car is the biggest chunk. Then there can be some serious maintenance, and the problem is, it varies so dramatically that it's hard to say with any certainty what that's going to be. Because a car that's been really well maintained and everything's sorted and all that stuff might need almost nothing. Maybe just annual services, oil change, tires, brakes, fluids, etc. And that's kind of about it. But you might get one of the cars that, well, everything's been deferred and all of a sudden it needs ball joints and a clutch and engine mounts and a transmission mount and the leather's shrunk and there's sticky buttons and the convertible top doesn't work and all this other crap. And next thing you know, you're spending $30,000, $40,000 to get the car sorted. We've seen this happen. So when it comes to supercars and when it comes to the brand of supercar, honestly, the equation kind of is transferable onto the different brands. What I would say is you need to do your research on not just the brand that you're interested in, because they kind of have a little bit of different depreciation curves and they also have different maintenance expectations, but do a lot of research on the specific model. Because the difference between a Ferrari F430 and a Ferrari 360 and a Ferrari 355 and a Ferrari 458 is very, very substantial. The amount of maintenance cost can be absolutely huge. Plus, they all have different depreciation curves, they have different valuations, and so on and so on. So there's a lot of things to do. So that brings us to one of my big points, which is before you buy the car, not only do you need to do a lot of research to figure out exactly what it is you're interested in, you probably should get help. So that could be a PPI, a pre-purchase inspection, or it could be hiring consultation. So those are services that we offer. You can hire us to help you with figuring out what car you should buy. And we also do PPI services. But there's other companies out there that do that sort of stuff too. And there's other people that do this sort of stuff. So even if you don't want to hire us, maybe you don't like looking at my face, I don't know, maybe you don't want to talk to me. That's fine. Still do yourself a favor. Get a PPI and maybe have someone that you hire to help you talk through these things. Because if you've never bought one of these cars and all you're basing all your research on is the internet, well, the internet's kind of a mixed bag. It depends where you're learning your stuff from. Because I've seen posts on Facebook where someone's like, oh, tell me all the things that are, I should expect about this car or that car. And of course, like the people who own the car are going to sit there and tell you all these wonderful things and never talk about the bad things. So unless they had a bad experience, and maybe they just shit on the car left and right, and it creates a totally sour taste in your mouth versus, so it's all over the board. So all I'm saying is there's like different opinions, there's different realities, and it can vary a lot. Okay, so what about financing? A lot of people also, again, say, never buy one of these cars unless you have all cash. That's totally crap. Huge number of our buyers finance part of these cars or finance a substantial amount of these cars. And I actually am one of the believers of use other people's money when possible. So if you can get access to the bank's money and it's cheap, probably is a reasonable thing to do. So what does that look like? Well, it depends. I don't know what your credit score is. I don't know how much money down you're putting. I will tell you that usually most of exotic car financing want 20% down, although that's not entirely true. Sometimes you can go through like a local credit union. It just depends on your relationship with the bank, on your credit score, on how much money you're putting down, and so on and so on and so on. So I personally am a believer that these are generally appreciating assets, so finance them doesn't mean it's that big of a risk, because also the other thing is you probably aren't going to own this car that long in the scheme of things. Most people only own these cars for about 2 to 3 years, so you're probably not even going to take the entire financing period. You're probably going to own the car for a couple of years and then sell it and buy another one. That's typically what happens is people buy their first supercar, they drive it for a while, they like it, and then they say, oh, I want to get the next model or something better or whatever, and so they don't end up paying off the car and they end up just selling the car and having it roll on to the next one or whatever. But take that with a grain of salt. I don't know your finances. I don't know your situation personally. So if you think it makes sense to finance for your personal situation, I don't think it's a bad idea. If you want to pay cash, that's also not a bad idea. Maybe you've got tons of cash laying around. Great. That's a good thing. As far as how much to set aside in maintenance, again, very model specific. It depends on the car even. So like the difference between that 430 and this 430 to get them sorted, that car needs very little. This car needs an awful lot. This car needs over $40,000 of work. That car only needs maybe $10,000 of work. And honestly, a lot of the things you could probably just live with on that car. This car, yeah, you ain't driving that one. So again, there's a lot of variance, and that's why it's so hard to do this type of video, because you can't just say, oh, the exact number you need to buy a Ferrari F430 is this. It's all over the place. The other thing to factor in for the maintenance side is that there's a lot of known maintenance things, and then there's kind of like the random unknown bad things. So, for example, on a Ferrari F430, actually most Ferraris in general, you're going to have leather shrinkage and you're going to have sticky buttons if it hasn't already been taken care of. Once they get taken care of, generally they don't happen again. But you've got that, you've got ball joints that go bad, you've got, engine mounts that go bad pretty regularly. The clutch only lasts about 40,000 miles, so you can kind of factor that in. So there's a lot of known things that happen. And of course you got annual services, like I mentioned earlier, tires, brakes, fluids, that sort of stuff that just kind of keep going on and on and on. If you got a timing belt car, if you got one of the older cars that need timing belts, obviously you can expect it to be doing a timing belt service about every 5 years, and those can vary greatly in price. If it's a 360, it can be a couple $1,000s. If it's 355, you're looking at 5 figures in order to do it, because you have to pull the engine every time you do that. So those are kind of like the known things. The problem is what happens when you've got the unknown things. So, some random bad thing happens that can be quite pricey. So I think a good strategy when you have one of these cars is you want to keep a reserve of money aside. And maybe you just contribute to that every year or every month or whatever it is, whatever floats your personal financing scheme. I think it's a reasonable thing to do, is like maybe have a separate account, or you just have earmarked money for it set aside. I don't know what the number is. It varies based on model, but I feel like somewhere between $5,000 and $10,000 set aside is going to cover a lot of the basic unknowns that could happen. And if it's really catastrophic, okay, well then maybe you gotta put the car in the garage for a while, let it sit while you save up some money and can afford to fix it for real, or afford to fix whatever else is going on. Annual services, again, the newer the car, the less the annual service generally costs. Once you get to the timing chain cars, so the 430s on up, the annual services drop in value or in cost significantly, because you're really not doing all that much. Now, still anticipate, I'm going to say $1,000 to $3,000 annual service on most of the modern cars, with bigger bills on years that you do more stuff. So like, if you start doing the spark plugs and, all the other crap that goes with it, transmission fluid, other fluid flushes. Now, okay, you can start getting to a couple $1,000s, and it's a little bit more than the annual service, but it's not crazy amounts of money. Okay, so you kind of got the basics for buying the car and maintaining the car. Now you've got the fun stuff, insurance. Yeah, it's all over the board. We've had luck using regular insurance companies like State Farm. We've also had, I know I've personally used USAA on quite a few of my Ferraris. A lot of people we know use specialty collectors insurance like Haggerty or American Collectors and some of those companies. Declared value policies versus, I don't know what they call it, assessed value or whatever it's called. It's a little bit weird because the cars are appreciating. I don't know that you necessarily have to do a declared value policy. I know a lot of people feel like they have to do that because I need to know that I'm going to get exactly what I paid for the car and stuff. Well, the reality is most of these cars, if you don't have a super rare car, if you got, like, for example, a regular 430, what we've seen, so when we had our shop have the flood, we had 4 client cars get totaled. And what I'll tell you is all 4 of those client cars, they got paid out more than they paid for the cars. So insurance did them pretty good. They actually made a little bit of money. They were all very happy, and none of those were on declared value policies except one of the guys. And hilariously, the one guy who had the declared value policy had the most difficulty because they didn't want to total the car because they knew they were going to have to do the payout and it was going to be this much money. So they were doing everything they could to try not to total the car, versus the other people who, one of them was USA, one of them was State Farm, and I want to say one of them was Geico. Those guys, boom, they got paid out within a week or two. Very quick, very efficient. The other one was with Haggerty, and it took over a month to get them to finally agree to total the car, and it was an absolute nightmare. I had to jump through all these hoops and do all these inspections and all this bullshit. So I'm not saying Haggerty's bad or good. I'm not saying the other companies are bad or good. I'm just saying that's what our experience was in that particular instance. So your mileage may vary. What I will tell you is I've seen the cost of insurance range from right around $1,500 to $2,000 a year, all the way up to like $4,000 and $5,000 a year. And obviously it's going to depend greatly on your driving history, where you live, the value of the car, and so on. So I can't tell you how much it's going to cost. You're going to have to just talk to an insurance company. But I will give you a little bit of a heads up that we've had people trying to get insurance on these cars run into serious difficulty where they just could not find a good insurance carrier. So that's a challenge. I would tell you, if you are looking to get insurance, we do have our insurance broker that we use for some of our stuff. He can try and get you set up. So if you want to reach out to him, we can get you his contact information. He's done a really good job for us. You can send him a text. His number is right here, and he can get you set up. I don't know if he can do all states, but anyway, by the way, this is not sponsored. We just like him, and he's done a good job, so we like kicking business his way. So those are kind of like the big financial considerations. Obviously, don't forget to think about tax when you buy the car, because tax on a $100,000+ vehicle can be quite substantial depending where you are. But, I mean, if you're thinking, oh, you know, what about fuel and what about these other costs? I hate to tell you, but if that scares you, you probably shouldn't buy one of these cars. They get shit for fuel mileage. You're gonna be spending a lot of money on fuel when you drive them. So just kind of, you know, deal with it. It's not cheap. There's no way around it. These cars are not cheap. There's no way to look at this car and say, oh yeah, that's a completely reasonable thing to do with my money. No, it's not. These are not reasonable cars to buy. They are completely unreasonable cars to buy. So if you're buying one of these, you should be in a position where you have the excess financial capability to have something that's completely unreasonable and just accept that. So it's fun. You're going to have a riot. I think it's some of the best money you'll ever spend in your life, but it is not a practical thing to do. This is not reasonable. Also factor in that a lot of these cars actually cost less than a lot of these modern like SUVs and pickup trucks and stuff like that. And those are all going to depreciate into absolute oblivion, whereas these cars are not. So that is really the biggest thing that makes the equation more interesting, is the fact that these cars are holding value and not really depreciating when they're older. So don't buy them new. If you're buying new, it's again, totally different thing. We're not talking about those in this video. All right, I hope that helps at least set up some of the things that people ask about and some of the worries that people have. Now, obviously, again, I can't address everything in a simple YouTube video. So if you want help, if you want individualized help, send us an email, or actually better yet, go to our website, ngsupercars.com, and fill out the form and get in touch with us, and we can talk to you about scheduling a consultation, or if you need a PPI, we can also do those things for you. I think they're extremely valuable. We've helped people save a ton of money, and we've helped people get good examples of these cars. That's one of the things that we're really proud of, is we've helped literally hundreds and hundreds of people do that. Pretty awesome service. But that's it for this video. I hope you guys found this helpful, and if so, do me a favor, hit the like button, maybe even share this video. But we'll see you guys in the next one. We're gonna be doing a lot of cool car stuff. You're gonna want to stay tuned. It's gonna be sweet.